The comedian Stephen Wright once said, "If at first you don't succeed, then skydiving is definitely not for you." And as funny as that is, I'm here to tell you it's actually not true. In this video, I'm going to tell you a story about the first time I ever went skydiving and how I failed miserably and still learned a lot of lessons. And obviously, I'm still here to tell you about it on YouTube. Before I tell the actual story, I'm going to give you a little background about where I was, why I was there. It was 2012. I was about 15 years into my Army career, and I got deployed to Tampa, Florida. And if that doesn't sound right to you, it probably shouldn't. My civil affairs company was actually deployed all over the Middle East to several different countries, and two of us had to go down to the Special Operations Command Central headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base and coordinate everything down there with the commanding general and his staff. So I was down in Tampa for about 9 months during what was actually a deployment for everybody else. And no, that doesn't count as one of my 11 deployments. That's why I air quoted it. But anyway, if you've never been in the military, when you go on temporary duty, it's called TDY, anywhere, whether it's overseas or Tampa, Florida, you get paid extra money. You get per diem money to pay for the extra expenses on top of your normal expenses. And sometimes you get a lot of extra money. In my case, in Tampa, since it was an expensive place to live, I got a lot of extra money. So I found myself in Tampa, Florida. I was divorced at the time, so living the single life. I was in my early 30s and I had all this extra money. So what is a responsible young man in his early 30s supposed to do with extra time and extra money? Being the responsible person that I am, I decided to invest it in myself and learn how to skydive. And honestly, it wasn't just the extra time and the extra money that prompted me to go and get my skydiving license. My boss was actually already an avid skydiver, and he was going to skydive on weekends. We lived together in an apartment, so he was always talking about skydiving, and he talked about how cool this place was, Skydive City. It happens to be one of the premier skydiving facilities in the United States, and it was a 20-minute drive from our apartment. So he was there a lot, and he was just talking about it all the time. So I went and checked it out, and yeah, it seemed pretty cool. So I decided I was going to go and get my A license for skydiving. And I was all in. I actually bought this all-inclusive package where I paid for all my lift tickets up front and the school and everything. What that consisted of was all the tickets for me and the coaches that would be required to jump with me all the way from start to finish of my A license, my first 25 jumps. So after I paid the money, I had to wait for a couple days, and then they had a Saturday class. And it was like all day Saturday. We learned how to do everything. We learned the hand signals and how everything works, all the rules. And we were actually supposed to jump Saturday night, but either they didn't have enough space or weather, I don't remember. So we had to come back the next morning and jump on Sunday. Came back the next morning, linked up with my coach, and we had to go through all these ground drills. I was on this little cart, and I was practicing my arching and practicing waving off and reaching back and pulling the ripcord. We went over this over and over and over again while we were waiting for our turn to go up in the plane. During the first couple jumps, you actually have to jump with two coaches. So even though I bought the package altogether, those lift tickets for the first few jumps were very expensive because I'm paying for my ticket and two different coaches' tickets and their time. So if I would have bought those tickets individually, those specific ones for those jumps were $250 at that time. This will be important in a minute. After what seemed like forever, it was finally our turn to go up in the plane. And so we went up, we're flying around, we get up to like 13,000 feet, and it's our turn to jump. And I get in the door. I don't want to say I wasn't nervous, but I was probably less nervous than I should have been because I had been airborne for 15 years in the Army, and I had about 45 static line jumps under my belt at the time. And I was a jump master, and I was good at it. But still, I'd never skydived before. I had kind of a weird attitude, like, okay, a little bit nervous, but I was also kind of like, yeah, come on, let's get this over with so I can get on with the fun stuff. Let's take the training wheels off. I don't like jumping with two coaches, all that stuff. A little bit of ego maybe played into that, but mostly just I felt like it wasn't that difficult of a thing, right? So we get to the spot to jump out. We're all out on the outside of the plane together, and 1, 2, 3, jump out. And even though I'd have 45 jumps and lots of time hanging out airplanes, it was different. If you have never skydived before, even if you've been skydiving, most people kind of consider like going, paying $100 or a couple $100 and attaching yourself to somebody and jumping out as skydiving. but that person is doing all the stuff. Like when you're skydiving by yourself, when you're actually skydiving, you have to really arch your back weird and it feels unnatural, and your body actually like shakes violently a lot more than you would think. And that's sort of surprising to me. Anyway, we got through that. The coaches were telling me, the coaches were on either side of me, telling me to put my arms out further, bring them in, straighten out my legs, all kinds of technical stuff. And they were doing it with hand signals that we'd already practiced. Well, everything was going swimmingly. So I was doing these very basic maneuvers with their help, just trying to keep myself stabilized because your body is arched very weird and the wind is rocking you around. So your body sort of rocks like a potato chip and it kind of feels weird. But I got that figured out, and I had to keep checking my altimeter on my wrist because at 4,500 feet, I had to do my next thing. And you're just falling towards the earth, right? So you're doing all this stuff, watching your coaches and watching your altimeter. There's a lot going on, right? Once I notice I'm at 5,000 feet, I'm like staring at my altimeter, get to 4,500 pretty quickly, and all right, time to go. I wave off my coaches and I go to pull the ripcord, and it's got a little hacky sack ball on it. And I noticed they didn't react. They didn't do anything, and they were right on me. These guys were on either side of me, like where my chute was going to come out. So instead of pulling the ripcord out, I went and waved them off again because I thought these guys clearly didn't see me wave off, because that's the point of waving off when you're skydiving, is for everybody else to get out of your way, and they didn't get out of my way. And as I was going to pull the second time, my chute opened up, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I got control of my toggles and, messed around with my chute a little bit, figured out how this particular parachute drives, right? Way different than the military chutes that don't really turn very much. So at this point, I've got the parachute figured out and I'm aiming for the drop zone. I'm heading that way. And all of a sudden, I start hearing this squawking on the walkie-talkie. I have a walkie-talkie strapped to my chest, and it was one of the coaches that was just jumping with me. He had gotten to the ground rather quickly, and he was screaming at me on this walkie-talkie, and I couldn't talk back to him because I was flying the parachute, but he was very upset with me. And here I am just living my best life, just trying to get down to earth, trying to have a good landing, which I did. I was very good at flying the chute and ended up right where I was aiming and did a nice soft landing. But the coach came running up to me, still pretty upset with me. I don't know if it's because he had said so many words already, but he's almost speechless. And he was just like, what were you doing? What were you trying to kill yourself? Like, you're a maniac. What's going on? Why didn't you pull your ripcord and all this stuff? And him asking me that forced me to really think about it. And I said, I don't know. I waved off and you guys didn't see me wave off. And so I didn't pull it, and I waved off again, and then you pulled it. And he's like, yeah, no, I saved your life. Do you have any idea how low we were when I pulled your chute? And I was like, not really. At that point, I was no longer looking at my altimeter, so I didn't really know. And let me tell you, he thought that my answer to his question was the stupidest answer he'd ever heard. And he told me, I have never seen this in all my years teaching skydivers. I've never seen this happen before. He said, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. I can't believe it. I thought you were trying to kill yourself or something. And now you're telling me that you didn't pull it because we were in your way. And I said, yeah, it sounds dumb, but I didn't know what you were doing. And he said, you don't think we knew what we were doing? I said, honestly, at the time, I thought you didn't see me. Honestly, it made sense at the time. Now that you're yelling at me and you're telling me in your perspective, yeah, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I'm sorry. And once he did finally calm down enough to have a rational discussion about it, he did let me know that I'd failed that particular skydive because I didn't pull my own ripcord. I didn't actually skydive. So that actually did not count as my first skydive. I failed. And yeah, cool, I didn't die, but I did have to buy that specific lift ticket again because there was only so many in that package. So that mistake cost me $250 on top of the $2,500 that I already paid to get my license. So even though I didn't die, it was a pretty expensive mistake. And I'm pretty sure that coach avoided me for the rest of the time that I was there getting my license. And I think he really didn't like me, but I don't really blame him. And you can imagine I spent a lot of time thinking about why I did that, especially when he told me he's never seen that before. That was the first time he's ever seen that. That's crazy. He can't believe that. So of course I was beating myself up trying to figure out, yeah, why did I do that? And I came to the conclusion that it was a combination of three things together. First of all, I wasn't as scared as I probably should be that I'm plummeting to the earth because I was used to being up in airplanes. I was used to jumping out of the airplanes, even though not from that altitude. Jumping out of an airplane is jumping out of an airplane. So I kind of had a nonchalant attitude about it when I was training. That's one thing. And the second thing is my experience worked against me. So in the Army, when you're jumping, you have to stay away from everybody. You stay well away from everybody. And in this scenario, these two guys were like right on me. And so when I waved them off, I really did assume they were going to do something. I thought they were going to move out of my way for safety purposes. And when they didn't, then the third thing happened. I overthought things. I overthought what was going on. And when you're free falling and you're already kind of close to the ground, you really don't have time to overthink things. I didn't have the luxury of time to overthink things, yet I still went ahead and overthought what was going on with the situation. But let me tell you, just like every other situation where I've failed something, I learned so much. I mean, first of all, sorry, Stephen Wright. I learned that on my second jump, I just had to pull my own ripcord. That was the obvious lesson, right? But I also learned 4 important lessons that I took with me into the rest of my life, which is don't get too comfortable with something just because you have experience with it. Don't let your knowledge of something interfere with other people's knowledge of something when you're working as a team. Don't overthink things. Don't second guess yourself, especially in a critical time when you don't have time. Don't waste any of that time second guessing yourself. And then the fourth thing is if there's a process to something, trust the process and go through the process. And that's actually served me well in other life and death situations and other daily mundane task situations. And I think those 4 things are important in everybody's life. And lastly, it's so important for you to fail sometimes and make mistakes and learn from that and take something away from the mistakes that you make and carry them into other parts of your life. Maybe try failing in something that's less likely to result in your death, but let yourself fail, let yourself make mistakes and learn from them and grow and become better and stronger and smarter, and you'll do well. I promise. Thanks for joining me for this SPF 100, that's Super Personal Friday video. We'll be doing these every Friday. I'll be sharing my experiences or my personal philosophies, something personal, something very personal to me, just so you can get to know me a little bit better and what my real estate team can offer you besides just being able to sell your house. But of course, we do that too. And if you need help, reach out. You can find us. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.